Welcome to Get the Facts, the show for the latest updates on current issues. I'm your host, Theodore Henry. Now, there's much discussion in the media about the constitutional reform work underway in the country right now. You may have opinions on the matter, but the subject is not an easy one, nor should it be taken lightly, as the fate of every individual in Jamaica is at stake. Here with me today is attorney at law Dr. Lloyd Barnett. With his long and distinguished career in law and public service, he will help us make clearer what is constitutional reform and its importance, in addition to the process that we are going through right now. Dr. Barnett, welcome to Get the Facts.
Thank you for inviting me. This is such an important subject.
Oh, it is. It is. So let's jump into getting the facts. Let's start with the basics, Dr. Barnett. What is meant by constitutional reform?
It's really changing your basic legal instrument because the Constitution governs us. Yeah. It governs how the people who govern the country are elected and what are their powers and the extent of their accountability to the people. So that it is the basic law. All other laws that are made have to conform with the Constitution.
So our legal foundation.
It is the foundation document, actually.
Okay, okay. So can you explain, give us the details on the process that's currently underway to move Jamaica from a constitutional monarchy, starting with what a constitutional monarchy entails?
Okay, a constitutional monarchy is a country that the head of state is a monarch. Usually that implies that it is not based on merit, but upon blood, some hereditary succession to the throne. And you can call the president a king or emperor, but the distinguishing feature is that it is based on a family relationship rather than on the selection of the people.
Right.
So that we have a monarchical form because the British monarchy is what dictates who the Jamaican monarch is.
So we're now moving towards a republic. How are we doing that and what's the difference?
Well, Jamaica is one of the few countries in Commonwealth countries in which the monarchical form is deeply entrenched. In other words, it cannot be removed by conforming with the most difficult amendment procedure. Okay. Special majorities in Parliament and a referendum, so that the people have to be consulted and have to be educated, inspired in relation to that move, which we have had the monarchy for all of our colonial life as well as our life as a sovereign nation.
So the Constitution itself, this foundational legal document, as you explained to us, it also has tenets that dictate how it can be modified.
Yes, indeed. And as I was hinting, in the case of the Jamaican Constitution, it is exceptional in that the most difficult amendment procedure is applied to the monarchy. So in order to make that change and to become a republic, we have to have a referendum. Right. It can't be done by Parliament alone. You have to have a special majority in Parliament. Time factors have to be built into it. You have to have 3 months between the introduction of the measure in Parliament and its debate, and then another 3 months before, and then another period before it is put to the people in the referendum. So it allows for a compulsory period of consultation.
Okay, okay. Those critical steps are very interesting. Where are we in that process?
Well, we haven't tabled the bill yet, so that there is a compulsory consultation process. What we have been having is a consultation process before the formulation of the new constitution, so to speak.
Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, we're doing a pre-consultation.
Yes, a pre legislative process, consultation, but it doesn't end there.
Right.
It continues afterwards, and there has to be debates in Parliament, and people will be entitled, the Jamaican people will be entitled to make submissions and make representations to any parliamentary committee that's established.
Doc, I'm not sure if you keep up, like you listen to the radio and TV, and
I listen to some, and unfortunately, not all persons really either understand the process or the implications,
yes,
because constitutional reform is almost impossible without consensus. And in the Jamaican case, where the amendment procedures are so complex and difficult, it is even more important to have consensus.
right,
Because we have had lots of experience in the world, in the Commonwealth, and in the Caribbean, in which attempts at constitutional reform have failed because there was no consensus. And consensus doesn't really mean only the existence of opposition to a measure, but the non-support. Because there have been cases in which a party, a national party, does not support, and the people sees this as a negative and votes negatively.
I see. I see. So you're hearing a lot of opinions. We're still in the pre-consultation phase. You're hearing the opinions. Just before we go to our break, how do you think government, leaders of civil society, can help people to understand the import of this process beyond just opinions?
Well, I believe that dialogue is critical, and dialogue in this case has to be conducted in a friendly way, in a patriotic way, or looking forward to not winning a battle, but succeeding as a nation in which we are fellow citizens cooperating to achieve the best objectives, the best aims, the best results, so that it will only succeed if we seek to eliminate differences and to build consensus.
Build consensus. Let's underline that for a moment. We're going to take a break now, but when we come back, we'll hear more from Dr. Barnett. Soon come.
Our pensioners are our society's backbone, and we want to make sure they are cared for. That is why the annual pension exemption and age relief exemption has been increased to $250,000 each. You have worked hard for your country, and we want you to have a little more peace of mind in retirement. Your government is caring for you.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Welcome back. We're continuing the conversation with attorney at law and constitutional expert, Dr. Lloyd Barnett. Dr. Barnett, let's pick up right where we ended. You had spoken about building consensus, you spoke about communication, you spoke about getting rid of the divisive elements because we all have to live here. But you are a member of the Constitutional Reform Committee, and if I understand this correctly, it's established to help Jamaica smooth the transition to republic. Now, what are some of the things that the committee has been looking at? And is there anything...
One of the things about the terms of reference is that it placed great emphasis on seeking to establish consensus, because there had been a measure of consensus in earlier efforts to reform the Constitution.
Being that we need to do it.
Yes, there were reports which made recommendations.
Right.
And there were parliamentary committees that affirmed the recommendations, so that certain things were agreed on.
Right.
Like the establishment of the Republic and the Jamaicanization of the Constitution, and so that the committee was tasked with the duty to identify where consensus existed and also to build consensus where it had either been eroded or never existed.
Okay.
So that, fortunately, in a way, the two major changes, namely the Jamaicanization of the Constitution, that is that instead of a British End Council, our supreme law should be a Jamaican instrument,
Right.
made by Jamaicans in Jamaica and signed in the end by a Jamaican,
Fair.
instead of signed by a clerk in the Privy Council in London.
Right.
So that the Jamaicanization is something that was virtually agreed across the board. Then there is the abolition of the monarchy, which we have and have to associate that with the whole colonial history of slavery and crown colony government and oppression of the majority of the people.
Yes.
And so the removal of the monarchical form and the king as our sovereign is a matter for which there had been great consensus. And so that starting with those two major things, then we had to go on now with consequential matters.
Yes.
For instance, once you establish a republic, or you decide to establish a republic, then the question comes as to who will be the head of state in that republic.
Yes.
And some people will say you should have an elected head of state.
Right.
So you're going into a different system altogether, which is the executive presidential system, as you have in some countries like the United States and some South American countries.
Right.
Or you can go into the parliamentary system, as you have in, say, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and several Commonwealth and European countries. People think the parliamentary system only exists in Commonwealth countries, but it also exists in several other countries outside of the Commonwealth,
Right.
and have been very successful in many of those countries.
So if I can jump in here, so the work of the Constitutional Reform Committee, especially on that last point, is to establish consensus on which one works best for us?
Yes, because once you decide that you're going to have a republic, then the next step is what type of president you're going to have, what type of head of state you're going to have. Is it going to be a nominal head of state, a formal head of state, a ceremonial head of state, or is it going to be an executive president who has his own powers and, you know, operates almost independently? So that that's a decision we had to make. That seems to have secured consensus among the political leaders, though there are some people in the society who say they prefer to have a direct vote, so they participate in the election.
Right.
And so that the CRC, having done the consultations and come to the conclusion that on the basis of the performance of the parliamentary cabinet system,
Yes.
as distinguished from the executive presidential system, the parliamentary cabinet system was the one that offered the better prospect of sustaining democracy and good government.
Okay. Okay.
So that is a specific recommendation that the Constitutional Reform Committee has made.
Yes.
So that having decided on that now, you had to decide what are the powers that this formal president is going to exercise. And essentially what we said is that there would be the same powers as the Governor General now exercises, although he'll do it as not as representative of the English monarch, but as the representative of the people of Jamaica.
So that gives us a bit of an answer as to how the balance of power is affected within the government. We're almost out of time, Dr. Barnett, so I want to touch on this one very quickly. Are there any major challenges that are
Yes,
that
the major challenge is the one that has been in the public domain in my mind. It is the question of whether it is consistent
Yes.
with our national identity and pride to have the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, which is His Majesty's Council, as our final court of appeal.
Right.
Because in this case, the government and the opposition do not seem to be in the same position.
Right.
The opposition is very clear that it is essential in their view that the movement from the monarchical form should also include a movement away from the
Privy.
Council.
Right.
And the government has not been clear. I don't know if you have any information, but I have not been able to see a specific decision by the government on the point.
Right.
And because this also will affect the entire progress of the reform, since the leader of the opposition is saying there can be no progress, there can be no combined effort unless this is also dealt with.
Right.
So this is a major stumbling block which has to be solved.
I see. I see. On the road to Republic, there are many points of consensus. As you laid out, there are several formal steps that need to happen when the bill is actually tabled. We're now in that pre-consultation phase of this process. Dr. Barnett, a wide cross-section of society watches this program. They're watching you now. And I'd like to give you just a few seconds to give them your final word.
Well, fellow Jamaicans, we have labored under the yoke of colonialism, and we have to stand together, work together to ensure that we establish Jamaica as our own without any imperial throne to look up to. And we must therefore be friendly in expressing our differences and resolute in our determination to solve those differences.
Indeed, indeed. Dr. Barnett, we thank you for coming.
It's my pleasure.
All right, and we do appreciate you taking the time. We're probably going to need you to come back and take some more time.
It's my pleasure.
But we have come to the end of today's program, and we do hope that you were able to get a better understanding of the work that's taking place to reform the country's constitution and continue the process of ensuring Jamaica is truly and fully an independent state. I'm Theodore Henry. This has been Get the Facts. See you next time.